Okay, so this is assignment 2.1.7.1, basically the first part of our motor controller project. In this one, we're going to learn how to use a motor controller to control more than one motor at a time. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Now again, we've already learned how motors kind of work, the basics behind motors. By using electromagnetism, we can have devices basically that can turn electrical energy into kinetic energy. So we can, use electrical energy to spin a shaft, which then can turn a motor, or which, the motor turns, and then we can use that energy to kind of do other things like make wheels run or make, things lift up and so forth. So anyway, for this one though, we're going to use a device called a motor controller. Now the motor controller kind of combines all of our diodes and transistors and everything that we used in our circuit last time into one kind of nice device so we don't have to kind of do all that stuff every time we want to use a motor basically. What's also nice about a motor controller is you can use it to control more than one motor, and you can also control, or it can be separate from the voltage and the voltages basically that you need for the motor. So for example, we used the Arduino's voltage to kind of run our motor last time, and that's part of the reason we need the transistor though, because again the voltage from the Arduino was not enough to kind of drive the motor by itself, so we had kind of use a transistor to amplify that voltage. Again, all that is kind of done on the motor controller, and you can actually even hook up different voltage, different batteries and give it different voltage and give it a lot more power than what the Arduino can do, because you can have a separate voltage through the controller basically to kind of run your motors. So anyway, so it makes for a lot of kind of nice little things, especially when you're building things like robots and you want to use more than one motor. Okay, now for this project we'll be using two motors basically. We're going to be running two different motors and doing different things with those. Now unfortunately the actual motor controller that we use in our project is not actually represented in the virtual Autodesk Circuit Design Lab, so we'll have to use one that is kind of close but basically is a little different, but it'll give us an idea of kind of how motor controllers work. Alright, so we're going to get the parts together for this assignment. We need the Arduino, we need the breadboard, we need two DC motors, we're going to need the L239D motor controller, and 16 jumper wires. Okay, so let's go ahead and start putting that together. Alright, so we go to our circuit here, we got the breadboard, we got this. Alright, so we need to find some things here. And again, since it looks like it already has it for me, oh yeah, it's because I search for motor. Alright, so what you want to do, if you search for motor, basically you'll find, first of all, the motor controller, so I can bring that over. And then we can find two motors. Here we go. So there we go. That's all we need for this particular assignment. Because again, everything is kind of built into the motor controller, so we don't have to, the diodes and everything else is kind of already built in there. Alright, so let's start by, we're going to put the motor controller in the middle of the breadboard here, because it kind of, the legs on both sides are going to fit into the holes on either side here. So, well, we'll have to do that eventually anyway. So, but let's go ahead and rotate our motor controller there, and then kind of stick it in between here, just kind of make sure that it lines up and so forth. Alright, and then, let's rotate our motors here, because we want them to kind of sit up here, one, and this one here to sit here for another one. Alright, so then we're going to get everything hooked up, but let's start by getting our 5-volt power from the Arduino hooked up here. So I'm going to run this over to our positive channel on the breadboard, make that red, make it line up a little nice. Again, our ground's going to come out. We'll do the same thing here. Run over to our negative channel. There we go. Make that black. Good. Oops. There we go. Get this lined up a little better. There we go. Alright, so there we have our positive and our negative kind of channels on our breadboard lined up. Now, to start hooking up the motor controller actually has 8 pins running down one side and then 8 more pins running up the other side. So basically the pins are numbered from 1 to 8 on this side and then from 9 to 16 over here on this side. In order to figure out kind of where things were kind of plugged in, I had to go out on the internet, of course, and find a diagram of it. Okay, so I had to get I had to go on the internet basically and find a diagram for my L23 or 293D motor controller here. As you can see, again, there's 8 pins going down to one side, another 8 pins going up this side to get to 16. The other thing to keep in mind is the pins kind of start numbering from the left side of where the notch in the thing is. So if I go back here, for example, to my circuit here, you'll see there's a little notch here at the top of this diagram here. It's also a little spot here to kind of tell you which one goes to which one and so forth. All right, so but anyway, if we look here, we see that I have enable 1 and 2. Basically, that's for this side of the motor controller. And again, that's to kind of get it started. I have input 1, output 1. I have a ground, and then I have output 2, input 2, and then a voltage here. All right, so that's kind of all this stuff here is kind of controlled with all this stuff on this side is kind of controlling one side of the motor controller, and then this side here controls the other side. And again, this one can actually, I think it can run 4 different motors as long as you're not going to reverse the motor in any way. So again, if you're just going one direction, I think you can get 4 different motors going. If you plan on reversing, which actually we will do, we want to run the motor in 2 different directions. Then we're going to, then we'll only use one, each side of the motor controller becomes, controls one of the motors in. So we can only do 2 motors if you're going to do reversing direction and so forth. All right, so let's go ahead and start hooking this up. Let me go back here. All right, so again, we're going to hook this up by let's start with our ground ones here. So again, what you can do here is if you hover your mouse over the pin, you can actually see which one is which. So in this case, I'm going to connect my ground on this side to my negative channel here and make that black. All right, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to find the ground here. Let's click on there. Let's go down to about here. Again, be careful. Don't kind of click into a hole here because you want to go across to the negative channel. All right, and then you can kind of line it up later. All right, so again, so we got one ground going into here, one ground going into there for the negative channel and so forth. All right, so we're going to do the same thing with our positive, or with the voltage here. So this is voltage on the one side, so we're going to hook that up to this side, make that red. Okay, and then we want to find the voltage over here, which I think is this one here. Yep. So we're going to bring that down and kind of bring it over. Whoops. See, now I did exactly what I told you guys not to do. So I'm going to delete this one here, because basically I just hooked that up to that one hole there. So kind of bring it across, hook it up to the red. Again, then we can line it up. All right. So that goes into the positive channel too. So now we have our voltage and our ground hooked up here to for the motor controller. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to do is I want to hook up my motors to this motor controller. Okay. Now again, this one here, this terminal, we have terminal 1, terminal 2. Terminal 1 is kind of the black side of the motor. It doesn't really matter too much. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that whichever terminal you use for one, you use the same terminal on the other one for the same connection on the other side of the motor controller. You'll see what I mean here in a second. All right, so let's start with this one here. We're going to I want to make this motor on this side. So I'm going to hook this terminal up to, let's see. Actually, I think I might make this. I'm going to hook this one up to this side of it, and I'm going to hook this one up to this side. Okay. So let's start with this one. I'm going to hook this one up to the it's the output here, output 3. So let me run that over there to output 3. I think it's right about there. Let me just double check there. Yeah, so this needs to be output 3. So again, line it up. So the one side here goes to output 3. Let's make that blue. All right, and then this one here is going to go to actually output 4. So we're going to find output 4, which is here. Okay. So I'm going to actually run it from here over to my motor. Let me a little easier. There we go. Let's make that one turquoise. Alright, so we got, again, one side goes to output 3 here, one side goes to output 4. So again, what happens here is, again, I want output because I want to be able to power the motor, basically, in one direction or the other direction, depending on which of the outputs I'm using here. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to send the top one here over to output 2. So let's click on this one. And again, well, actually, I'm going to do this a little different. I'm going to find output 2 here. There we go. I'm going to click on there. I'm going to run this over. Kind of run this around. And then hook that up to this one here. Good. And I'm going to make that one purple. Again, you can kind of line these up a little bit if they're not already, just to make sure that they look nice. Alright, and then I'm going to run output 1. There it is, or that's input. Output 1 here. I'm going to run that one over to my other connector. And I'll make that one pink. And let me line this one up a little bit better. There. Alright, so again, make sure you put, this, like I said, this one here goes to output 4, this one here goes to output 3, terminal 1 is over here is going to go to output 2, and this one here is going to go to output 1. Okay, so once you get all those hooked up, now it's time to start hooking the Arduino up to our connection and so forth. Alright, so enable 2, well, let's start with enable 1 actually. So enable 1 is going to go to digital pin 3 here. So this enable 1 here, I'm going to run a wire over to here, come all the way down to 3, put that one in there. Let's make that one orange. Okay, just make sure it's lined up a little bit better. Alright, so again, digital pin 3 here is going to be our enable connection to our motor controller. Okay. The next one is going to be the input for 1. So input for 1 is going to be digital pin 5. So I'm going to run a thing from here over to here, go down to here, about, and into 5. Let's make that one yellow. Okay. Now I'm going to want input 2. So input 2 is going to go to digital pin 6. So let's run that over here. There we go. And we'll just keep that green. So that one goes in there. Alright, so again, enable 1 here. The first pin on the motor controller is going to go to digital pin 3. The input for 1 here is going to go to digital pin 5. And the input for 2 is going to go to 6. Okay, so 5 and 6 are going to be my input pins, and digital pin 3 is my enable pin for this side of the controller. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing for the other side. So I want to start up at the, let's see, where should I start? I'll start here with input 4. Actually, let me start with, let me go down here to this one. Okay, so enable here. So let's go to the enable. I'm going to run this one out. Run this all the way around. So this is going to go to digital pin 9. Digital pin 9. It's going to be close to my other wire there. Alright, let's make this one, I don't know, brown. Actually, let's make it white. White's not good color. Gray. There we go. Alright, so that's good. That's connecting up again. I'm connecting up my enable pin here to digital pin 9. So I'm going to put my input pin here. So input 3 is going to go to 10. So let's run this one out and around and over and down and then into 10 line that up a little bit better. Let's make that, I don't know, blue also. Well, let's make it orange. I know. So I'm running out of colors already. Okay, line that up. And then I need an input 4 here, and that's going to go to digital pin 11. So I'm just going to run that out here someplace. Go up here. Run that all the way around over to here. Well, come down here. Go to 11. All right, and let's make that purple. All right. So there we have it. So we have, again, we have an enable pin. Basically, in this case, it's 9 and 3. Then we have some input pins. We have input pins to 5 and 6 down here, and to 10 and 11 up here. So make sure that's lined up. All right, so that's basically it. So now we have everything hooked up. Now we can start coding. Okay, so again, we're going to be using pulse width modulation to help with this project. Again, mainly because we're using motors. But basically, again, just a little review here. Again, there's pins on the Arduino basically that can access either digital kind of information or analog information. And these are called the pulse width modulation pins. And basically, they can, again, we can send it analog data, or we can have it send us analog data, and we can also send it digital data too, depending on what we're trying to do and so forth. And that's why we're going to be using those. Again, for the Arduino, it's the 3, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11 pins. So we're going to be using some of those pins basically for our motor control circuit. So again, we've already gone through how to connect this up. Again, if you need to go through that again, go ahead and watch the thing. But again, this is kind of how the pins line up here. So for pin 1, we want to connect that to digital pin 3. For pin 2, we're going to connect that to digital pin 5. For pin 3 on the, again, when I say pins, I'm talking about the pins on the motor controller here. So for pin 3, it's going to go to motor 1 connector. Pin 4 is going to be empty. Pin 5 is going to be the negative channel, or the ground. Pin 6 will be motor 1 connector. Pin 7 will be digital pin 6. Pin 8 will be the positive channel. Pin 9 will be the digital pin 9. Pin 10 will be digital pin 10. Pin 11 is motor 2 connector. Pin 12 should be the negative channel. Pin 13 is going to be empty also. Pin 14 is going to be the motor 2 connector. So again, 2 connectors on both the motors. And pin 15 will be digital pin 11. And finally, pin 16 will be the positive channel. So again, that's how we hook up this motor controller to our motors and to the Arduino. Okay. Don't forget to hook, and again, don't forget the 5 volt and the ground pin. Okay. All right. So let's type our comments first. Again, for this sketch, we're going to be controlling a pair of DC motors with a motor controller integrated circuit, the L293D. Now, in the setup command, we're going to create actually before the setup function, we're going to create a constant variable to represent our digital pin. So we're going to control the motor from either side of the L293D. So we'll set 3 pins on either side with the pulse width modulation digital pins on the Arduino. All right, now inside the setup function, we're going to set the motor pin to be output. All right, then inside the loop, basically what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple different things. So we're first of all going to drive forward. So we're going to turn motor 1 on full speed, and then we're going to set motor 1 forward, set input 1 to high and input 2 to low. Okay, that is how we turn it on to full speed. And then we're going to turn motor 2 on to full speed. Again, we're using the digital part here. So input 3 goes to high, input 4 goes to low. All right, we're going to delay for 2 seconds, then we're going to drive backwards. So we're going to do the same thing, except this time we're going to do the other inputs. And again, this is where I was talking about how the different inputs, even though there's 4 different inputs on the motor controller, we're going to be using all 4 because, again, we want to not only drive the motor in one direction, we also want to drive it in the other direction. So in this case, we're going to go backwards. All right, so we're going to swap basically the inputs. So input 1 is going to be low, input 2 is going to be high, input 3 is going to be low, input 4 is going to be high. So we're going to set the motors to backwards like that. Then we're going to delay for 2 seconds, or 2,000 milliseconds. Now we're going to turn left. Now to do turning left, we're going to turn motor 1 on to full speed. Again, so we're going to set input 1 to high, input 2 to low. But motor 2 is going to be the opposite. So motor 2 is going to be on full speed, but it's going to be going backwards. So that's how we kind of turn to the left. Now, how do we know it's turning to the left? How do we know it's turning to the right? Again, it's just kind of how we set it up. So we can choose which motors we want to do this for. It doesn't make a difference in our virtual sketch here. Now, when you're actually building something that requires 2 motors and turning left or right, you need to make sure that you're actually doing it the right way. All right, so to turn right, motor 1 is going to be full speed backwards. Okay, and then motor 2 is going to be full speed forward. So again, we're kind of spinning the wheel in opposite directions to turn left and right. And then we're going to delay for 2 seconds before we move on. All right, now it's time to put in some code. But before we do that, of course, we want to check our we're going to use some test-driven development to make sure that everything we've got so far is working. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so again, in order to kind of test to make sure everything is working correctly, we're going to do a little test-driven development. So I've typed in all the comments here, basically, the comments at the top, and then inside the setup and inside the loop here. So we're going to make sure all that works first. Again, we don't expect it to do anything, but we still want to check it out here. Close that. And again, it's running, but nothing's happening, which is kind of what we expect. All right, but the good thing is nothing else is going on, so it's not having any other kind of problems. Okay, so let's go back to our code here. Start on our next slide. And what we're going to do next is we're going to start typing in the regular code. Again, we're going to create some integer variables here. These integer variables are going to correspond basically to the pins on the L293D motor controller. So the enable 2 pin is going to go to the digital pin or the PWM pin on the Arduino, which is 9. Integer 3 is going to go to 10. Input 3, I'm sorry, is going to go to 10. Input 4 is going to go 11. Enable 1 is going to go to 3. Input 1 is going to go to 5. Input 2 is going to go to 6. Okay, so that's getting the Arduino connected to our motor controller. Basically, that's where we want to set up some variables for those. All right, so inside our void setup, we need to basically set all these pins for output so that we can send in signals. So again, we're going to use pin mode and then enable put all these different variables. We're using the variable names. We're going to set all these up for output. So again, go ahead and type all that in. All right, now to move the motor forward, basically, we're going to use analog write. Now we could use basically we could use digital write because we're just going to be turning it on full speed basically, and then turning it off full speed. But basically, we're going to practice using the analog because we want to maybe control for this a little later on too. So anyway, we're going to type analog write. We're going to enable 1. So we're going to use the enable pin here. We're going to set that to 255. Okay. All right. And then we'll use the digital write actually to set the high and the low for the motor. So the analog write actually helps us with the enabling the pin or enabling the motor basically, and then the digital write will help us with actually setting it to go forward. So again, the input 1 sends the motor in one direction. The other input basically would send the motor in the other direction. And the way to think about this again is you think about how it's connected in your circuit. So for example, input 1 is basically is going to one of the leads coming off the motor. Now if I give that lead basically power, the motor will spin in one direction. So if I wanted to go the other direction, I'd give the other lead power, and I take away the power from the first lead, and then that spins it in the opposite direction. So that's kind of how to think about this. Okay, same thing with motor 2. I'm going to enable 2 with a analog write for 255, and then I'm going to set the input, the input 3 and input 4. Input 3 goes to high, input 4 goes to low. So basically that way I get both motors going in the same direction, hopefully going the right way and so forth. All right, so now we're going to delay for 2 seconds, basically 2,000 milliseconds. All right, and then it's time to go backwards. So in this case I'm going to again enable the turn on the enable 1 so that I can write to my motor. Then I'm going to do the opposite. So input 1 is going to be low now, input 2 is going to be high. I'm going to do the same thing for motor 2. So I'm going to, for the enable 2, I'm going to analog right there for 255. And input low, 3 is going to be low, and input 4 is going to be high. I'm going to delay for another 2 seconds. Okay. All right, now we're going to turn motor 1 on to full speed for turning left. Okay, so again, we're going to do the same thing we did the first time for setting the first motor to turn forward at high speed. Now we're going to do this for motor 2. We're going to set it on full speed, but full speed in reverse. So we're going to set motor 2 backwards. So we're going to stick with the original, or the one that we just did, basically, where input 3 is low and input 4 is high. Okay. And we're going to delay another 2 seconds, and then we're going to do the same, but we're going to do the opposite now to drive right. So we're going to, again, enable 1, analog right, enable 1. We're going to set input 1 to low, input high, or input 2 to high, enable 2, and then we're going to set input 3 to high and input 4 to low. Okay, and we'll delay 2 seconds and so forth. So once we get all that code in there, we should be able to see it kind of doing those 2 things. Now, basically, again, because it's inside our loop, it's going to do this over and over and over again. So that's the way you can kind of watch it and see how it's working and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, so again, I've typed in the code. So again, I've created my constant integer variables, enable 2, and input 3, input 4, enable 1, input 1, input 2, and match those up with, of course, the digital, or the PWM pins and so forth on the Arduino. Again, I've set all these pins for output so we can send it information. Again, we start by using the analog right to enable the first motor to be used, to basically send some information for turning it on. And again, that's what the enable does. The number here, the 255, actually, I think that can actually control the speed, so basically, of your motor. So, and then when you input like the high and the low, if you have this set to as high as you got, it'll go as fast as it can go, versus if you set it to I don't know, half of that speed, it would go at half speed and so forth. So anyway, that's kind of, I think that's exactly how it works with this particular motor controller. But anyway, same thing for motor 2. Again, I set it so it does the high speed, or it goes as fast as it can, and then I set the input 3 to high, input 4 to low. And again, if you look at these, again, match up with the pins on the terminals on the motors here and so forth. All right. So again, so the first thing we're going to do is just drive forward. So both the motors should spin in the same direction. The next one, they're going to spin backwards. So whatever direction they're going to go the opposite direction after about 2 seconds. All right, and then for the next thing, they're going to drive left, which means one motor is going to go in one direction, the other is going to go in the other direction. And again for 2 seconds, and then they're going to turn right. So they're going to spin the other direction. They're go the opposite way then. All right, and then again, then it'll repeat. So let's see if that's what happens, if we got everything coded right. So here we go. I can see that both my motors are going in the right direction. Now they're going negative, so they're going in reverse. All right, now one's going in positive, one's going in negative. All right. And then it switches back to the other one going negative and the other going positive. So if you watch it for long enough, you'll see that it kind of starts out with both of them positive, then both of them negative, then one positive, one negative, and then swapping back and forth. So again, that if it's doing that, then your code is doing exactly what you're expecting it to do. And you're controlling 2 different motors with your Arduino board. That's the more amazing, cool thing that you want to be able to do. Okay.